Dear Diary, today I take the next step in being an ADHD life coach at Indigo Hub. I can't believe it's happening. I want to build, create, and discover a place for us to truly be ourselves. I think this journey will be the Indigo Diaries. Dear Diary, welcome world to the Indigo Diaries, and welcome to Series 3, The World Through Our Eyes, with your host, me, Natasha Hickling. The Indigo Diaries is a podcast for those who want to learn about neurodivergency through others and our own experiences. And this week we're back with a Pick the Brain session, questions from clients, and we're going to discuss them in quite detail. And without a doubt, I'm not even going to introduce her. I will, because she's been here quite a few times now. So I invite back Holly. How are you doing, Holly?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today.
Right, good. And I think this is for me, this is a huge topic of kind of just huge.
Yes, it is.
So we're going to... So it's a huge topic, and we're going to be talking about self-care today. So, Holly, what's self-care to you?
I mean, for me, I think it's about a person trying to decide what is best for themselves and being who they are rather than what people expect them to be. And honestly, there are so many different interpretations of what self-care is. So it's kind of hard to specifically define it too.
Yeah, it is. And I find it's like, it's a decision to do what's best for yourself, being who you are and who people expect you to be. But within that, because everybody's really different, everybody has such a different interpretation of what it is. And I don't know about you, but I know, like, in every kind of world, but especially in the neurodivergency world, there's a lot of kind of negative view on self-care, and then we don't give ourselves it. So then that has a whole kind of ramifications from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. And I think sometimes an outsider who doesn't understand what it's like to be neurodivergent can look at that and think that person is, maybe being selfish or just too protective of their time. And so that's why it's really important to identify what you need and then really be able to put that in place.
Yeah, and I think that's really true. And it's like that, I always say to clients that, when you get on an airplane, the first thing they say to you is put your own oxygen mask on first before you put someone else's on. But I feel like society does this, right? You need to look after everybody else. But the whole self-care is decisions to do what's best for yourself, because only then will you be able to do what's best for other people, right?
Right. I agree. And I think somehow it's gotten a reputation as, frivolously spending money or buying products or, and it really, for me, doesn't have a lot to do with that. Every once in a while, there's maybe something involved like that, but it's really taking care of yourself, taking care of your body and your mind. And if you practice any sort of spirituality, that's a part of it too. So
yeah, I find it kind of like, and people might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If not, I've put it the links below. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like your needs, right? And it's things that you need. And self-care is not really a choice, because it's actually things that we need to survive. Like, they look at like the physical foundation of like food, exercise, and then there's like the emotional and your environment, and then your connection with other people. And without all that, you actually can't get to the high level of what hierarchy of needs is, what Maslow says, of achieving and being yourself, without these foundational things.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you come, if you're doing any sort of healing work or working with any sort of professional, and you come and you're not sleeping and you're not taking care of yourself with proper food and taking care of your physical needs, it's going to be harder than to look about moving up that hierarchy of finding a work that's fulfilling and having friendships and relationships that are meaningful and fulfilling. So you're right, it really starts with that base of taking care of yourself.
And obviously that looks, because everyone's different, sleep, food, but it does look very differently. But the thing that it always comes back to what you said earlier, it's a need.
Yes.
It obviously is a want as well, but it is a need, which means when it's a need, it's not selfish. It's something that we all need and we all need to be doing. But because there's this kind of, like you said earlier, that judgment, people go quick to judge. We don't give ourselves what we need. It's almost like, oh no, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing my work, when actually, no, you do need to sleep.
Yeah, it's really important. Absolutely.
And you said when we were talking before about the role of boundaries, I'm quite curious about kind of your view on the role of boundaries around self-care.
I've been doing a lot of reading about boundaries lately, and it just seems to me that is one of those foundational pieces of taking care of ourselves. And if things are getting in the way and we're not able to eat in a healthy way, or eat when we need to, or get space to take care of our mental or our emotional needs, or can't have the time to exercise or meet our physical needs, then that can become an issue of boundaries. And sometimes we need to protect our space and time and energy. Sometimes we don't always have that option, depending on what our work or our non-work life looks like. But setting boundaries isn't about controlling other people and pushing them away. It's about creating space and care for ourselves so that we can stay healthy and then be available for the people around us for work or relationships.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial. And what was coming up for me here, it comes back to the view of what self-care is. Because without really feeling like you deserve it or really doing what's best for you, without that perspective of I need this, then we let those boundaries almost fall. I always say to people are like, I don't want to be selfish, but I need to look after my kids, or I need to do this. And I always say, but what's selfish about having a nice meal or going to sleep? Like, because at the end of the day, if you don't do those things, you're not going to be able to look after them properly.
Yes, I mean, it's so true. It's so true. So it can be a balance. Sometimes it means saying no to something because you need to protect your space and time and energy, and other times you need to say yes because you're isolating too much, or you need that relational side or the community side of things. And no one can, people can guide you, coaches and therapy and think friends can guide you, and ultimately the decisions are ours as individuals to really discern what we need in the moment.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really crucial. And I always say to my clients, like, what is self-care to you? Because everybody has a different view and perspective or kind of connotation to it, which can actually be almost like a barrier. Like if you, like when I used to think about meditation, we talked about this and we did mindfulness. I thought, no, never ever but that's just because it's my perspective or my window into what it is. And it's really hard. So it's almost kind of finding your definition of what is self-care, and then obviously then owning that to then get the boundaries. Because if you don't know what it is and you're not doing it, then there's no way you can protect it. You're always going to say yes to other things.
Right. Which means you're saying no to yourself, and you're saying no to taking care of your own body and your own emotional needs and whatever energy you need for the other parts of life. So, yeah.
And when I think about self-care as well, like in the neurodivergent kind of lens, is that a lot of these things are quite boring, like going to sleep and like eating healthy, there's not really that much dopamine that comes with that. And I think that's also quite hard. And then not feeling like you deserve it, almost feeling like you've got to go to the next thing, almost like dopamine seeking. And it's hard. Or these things like meditation doesn't work for me. There's so many barriers when it comes to actually doing all these things. But yeah,
I agree. There can be a lot of barriers. And I think that's where it could be an individual process to think about how to make it a little bit more interesting or a little bit more fun. Is there a routine or a ritual that could be applied? Or, just as an example, if you're stale with what you're cooking, could you go get a cookbook from the library and choose one new recipe a week or something, finding ways to pull in that dopamine that's needed to stay in that self-care and to stay, making progress in that area.
Yeah, because like you said earlier, without that nice meal or the sleep or the exercise or being okay with yourself, you're not going to be able to do things like the dopamine seeker things that give you dopamine, whether it's going on holiday or playing on your game. You're not going to be able to do those things to your full potential, because without those barriers like Maslow underneath it, it's just not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to figure out what you need and then to be able to figure out what the balance is. And then honestly, as I say that, it's always going to be shifting and changing. And that's the tricky part too. So not only can it feel boring and uninteresting, as soon as you get something figured out, something in your life might change or shift. And so you're going to have to change or shift what your self-care looks like. So there's like ongoing assessment and discernment as part of this.
Yeah, I like what you said there. It's like figuring out what you need, then figuring out how to meet that, and then setting the boundary. Because, like if you don't, I'll give you an example. Like people will be like, oh, are you busy tonight? And I'd be like, no, I can do whatever. Like when I was back at university, yeah, we'll go out. And then like I wouldn't get sleep. And then the next day I would have stuff and it just wouldn't. Then the next 3 days I'd be recovering from that one decision.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of, I didn't know that I needed sleep. I didn't have that awareness that I needed this and I needed to do all these things. So my impulsivity just took over and was like, yeah. But actually, when I say yeah, like you said, you say no to other things and it actually hurts you in the long term. So actually knowing your needs is so crucial before you set that boundary.
Yeah. And I think, we've talked about this in a lot of our discussions, is this process of developing self-awareness.
Yeah.
So in university, that is one of the, that's one of the life lessons that, and you were learning that individuals are learning sort of at that age and stage. And the idea is to continue to develop that self-awareness so you can begin to identify your needs and make sure that you're able to meet them, or how to get them met through other resources.
Yeah, because like now, if someone said to me now, do you want to go out? I'd be like, okay, can I let you know? That's my ultimate thing. Can I let you know? And then I think like, let's say if it was tonight, I'd be like, no, because I've got work early tomorrow, so I can't, and I need to get a good night's sleep, but I can on Friday because I've got nothing the next day. So it's that because I know now what I need, I know that, and then I'm able to put that boundary in place.
Yes. And then it feels good when I think we feel better about ourselves too. We feel more empowered when we know what we need and we're able to take steps towards meeting those needs or getting help in meeting those needs too.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place for a pause. But I know I could keep going. So we'll come back and we'll step into kind of what you can do to find that awareness and what you can do to really take that self-care and take those steps. And we're out. If you would like any more information on Indigo Hub or our Indigo support group, then please check out our website below or our link to our social media platforms, or email at indigohub.adhd@gmail.com. If you would like to offer any comments, feedback, get support,
Or if you're interested in the world hearing your story, then please reach out through any of our avenues. As said before, have a positive week. Check in again later. And we're out. And we're back. And before the break, we were talking about self-care. And as always, we get to start talking. It's like, oh no, this time, let's keep going. We were joined by Holly talking about self-care. And I think this, the more and more we were talking, it definitely comes back to this. The first step is that self-awareness. And what would you say, like, how do people get the self-awareness when it comes to self-care?
I think it can be challenging to develop our own self-awareness. So I think having someone else around you, that could look like a lot of different things, any sort of healing work, coaching, therapy, a good friend, a partner of some sort, because I feel like we need that outside voice. We see ourselves through one lens, and other people are going to see us through a different lens and help us figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. Because if I always found that if you don't have that other person, trying to look at it through your own lens can be quite difficult. So
it can be hard to change our own perspective. If we're stuck in seeing something a certain way, or if we're stuck in a belief that taking care of ourselves in a certain way is selfish, maybe because of how we were raised or whatever it is, then it can be really hard to shift that perspective and open our minds up to the possibility that if things aren't working for us, maybe something needs to be changed so that we can maybe stop bumping into that belief as much.
Exactly, yeah. And like I think it all comes down to when I think of needs and things, it all comes down to energy, like self-care, because that's what self-care does, right? It's a bit like a battery. You've got a battery or a bank account or anything like that. It's all these different things that we do in life, like work, all these things take our energy or take your money out. But then you've also got to put money back in, and you've got to put energy back in so that you can then go again and do all these things. So if we're not, because what I find is a lot with people, especially with neurodivergency, is we're all about like, what's the next thing for the dopamine. We're trying to chase the next thing. But if you're doing and doing and doing and doing, where's the being and where's the actual taking care of yourself?
Yeah, and that's when we start talking about things like burnout, because there's that self-awareness got lost in there somewhere, and just that charging forward and the going and going and going. Maybe it's because we don't know how to identify, or we don't want to feel, or we don't want to face. And then our bodies will just reach a certain point and say, okay, you're done. I know you're trying to still move forward and keep yourself busy, or keep doing everything you're doing. Our bodies will often reach a point, and by the time we get there, it's a lot harder to then pause and figure out what we need and kind of fill that energy bank account back up.
And the energy bank account, if people have not heard of that, I'm going to put it in below, but it's used a lot. I mean, it's used a lot in general life, but it's used a lot in the autism world. And it's about kind of looking at your life and then looking what puts money in your account and what takes it out. And then it's about, well, what in a normal day, like, what have I actually taken out and what have I actually put in? And if you're taking out more than you're putting in, then you're going to get to that burnout. So it's and I like that because it's very logical, and it gives you evidence of why self-care is needed and so important.
Mm-hmm. I love it too. And I was just sitting here realizing I hadn't actually ever called it that, but I have a habit of kind of looking at my week and thinking, oh, I have this, which is going to take a lot of energy. So I need to make sure, as this is an introvert speaking here. And I know this, the way I would fill back up might be different, but if I know there's something that's going to really take a huge withdrawal from my energy bank account, then I kind of look over the course of the week and say, okay, I'm going to need to protect some time to fill myself back up. Otherwise, I'm going to be, by the end of the week, really struggling to have the energy and the attention and the presence that I need for the rest of the things in the week.
Yeah, and then there's that other one about spoons, like have you got, how many spoons do you have today, or based on your energy, and then what different, like, I don't know, cooking dinner or going out with your friends, did they take spoons or they give you more spoons? And it's the same thing. It's all these different analogies, or looking at the hierarchy of needs. Are you at physical today? You know, have you got enough of that? Have you got enough of this? It's just about almost like, it's almost like an external prompt to help you realize what you need for yourself. Because when we're just going, what do I need today? You know, that's when all that self-doubt and all that judgment of this is selfish to go to sleep tonight, you know, trickles in. So just having that external thing, I think, is really, like, just really nice, and just really creates that evidence.
I agree. And I was just sitting here thinking that I think sometimes it's easier to think about what fills us up, to sit for a moment and think, oh, this brings me joy, or this makes me happy. This kind of replenishes me. I think the harder self-awareness piece is figuring out what drains us, because we may be experiencing that, but not aware that that's what's happening. So we might reach the end of the day and feel extremely depleted and not realize we just had a really long meeting or a really hard conversation. And it's important to be aware of that too, so that, you know, as you're thinking about these analogies, that you're making sure you have enough spoons or enough in your bank account to get through your day.
Yeah, and I feel like the ones with the draining comes with that baggage of kind of, you know, I go out, I shouldn't be tired. You know, it's that should and that judgment around ourselves. That's why things like doing it with a coach or with a therapist or with someone that you work with or your partner or your parent, just getting that outside perspective, like, you know, what am I like when I get home after seeing my friends, or can just help take that kind of self-judgment off it.
Yes, yes.
And I find that usually these areas of life, like especially for neurodivergent, are really boring. Like when I think of like self-care, you know, my analogy is looking after yourself. You know, have I got enough energy for this and this? But things like meditation, right? You know, making sure my house is clean, all that sort of thing is really boring for me, and it's not my priority. And I think that can be quite hard when it comes to actually doing the task, which is, I suppose, after you've identified your needs, is the next bit of actually carrying them out. What do you think?
I agree with you. And I was just sitting here thinking we could have a whole conversation on how to try to make some of those things interesting. You know what? And I'm afraid I'll divert us too much, but you know, I'm having a bunch of ideas about how could someone, a neurodivergent individual, make some of these more tedious chores. What could they do to make them more interesting? So that could be a part of it too, is knowing the importance of them. Mm. And that they need to be a part of a routine. So how could it be more fun? Or is there a way to bring just a small amount of joy into it to make it a little bit less dreadful?
Yeah. And that's when you look at it, when you get that, you look at it through curiosity rather than like, you know, like the routine. A lot of people go, oh no, routine, because, you know, the stereotypical of ADHD is disorganized, right? We don't want a routine. I don't know. But actually routines can be good for us, but it doesn't need to be strict. You know, when we look at it with curiosity and creative, we're very creative. So, you know, how can you create a routine out of going to sleep? Let's make it interesting. And it's like what you said there, it's about creating the routines that are really necessary and good for us and essential, but doing it our way versus everybody else's way.
Right. And having some sort of routine protects the time that we often want for that creative time or for the fun that we do need for the dopamine. And if there's no structure at all, you know, we've talked before about resistance and avoidance. A lot of time can get spent on that. And then all of a sudden it's the end of the day and we haven't had the time that we want to do those creative activities, or pursue those interests that are maybe outside of school or work. And so a bit of a routine also ensures that we get to protect time for what we want too, that does fill us back up.
Yeah. And it also goes back to like what you were saying earlier about kind of when we do have those routines and do have those, then it becomes almost like a natural thing that we do, and we don't then burn out. And then, it's more of a proactive thing rather than we're reacting in the moment, right, I need a night of self-care, rather than, having a balance. And I know balance, and as I say that, my mind suddenly goes, oh no, this is boring. But a balance is good for us, and it for everybody, and it is necessary for everything.
Yeah. And when things can become, when we can fight through that initial discomfort or pushing uphill feeling of trying to do something that doesn't feel as interesting, once it becomes a habit, that's when we're in a good place, because then those things are kind of locked in that we do need in our lives.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's always going to be really hard to implement something that's healthy. There is a phase of resistance and avoidance and discomfort, and after a certain period of time, things can fall into a place as a habit, and then that's how we can really thrive.
And then when you do that, when you know your needs, you put them in place, becomes a habit, then you can set your boundary. Because when something's a routine and it's so much easier because it's solid, it's concrete, it's there.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's just so. I mean, I could carry on for hours, but we haven't got hours. So
I know.
Anything that's coming to you, Holly, that you kind of just want to leave us with?
Yeah, I think it's just important that if you have a sense of what you need, to trust that knowing. And if you're having trouble figuring out what you need, bring someone else in with a different perspective that can help you figure that out so that you don't feel stuck.
Yeah. And I'm leaving with that the word self-care doesn't need to be self-care. Like, it can be whatever word it's your definition. And it's just, and then that means that if you figure that your definition of it, it's doing that for yourself, and that self-care is not selfish. If anything, it's actually selfless, because when you start to do stuff for yourself is when you can do things for other people. And if you're doing for things for other people and you're not doing it for yourself, then that defeats the whole point of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So interesting. So thank you so much again, Holly, for your time. And
yes.
I always after these conversations, I always get like 1,000 ideas of what other things we could talk about.
I do too.
So we leave another episode with more things we can resonate with, and just more things to talk about and grow and build from that. And if you are interested in coming on a guest, or if you've got something that you want to pick our brains about, have questions, dilemmas, I want to share your experience in series 1, then please reach out through our social media avenues. And just like we said here, you don't have to do this alone, because it takes a village, and it really does. So come learn, listen, and experience the world through not my eyes, our eyes. Why not? Have a good week, and make sure you got your self-care in there this week. You've heard it from us. And we're out.
Dear Diary, as Indigo Hub's process goes on, it makes me stop and wonder, could there be more for us? More light, more experience, and more ways to see the world through our own eyes? I think this journey will be... Shh.